take a look at this. Take a real good look at this piece of art. It was donated by one of our Tavern regulars. This is just a cool sketch. It's a tactical diagram of a disaster in progress. You see the cleric in the back? The light of his deity is flaring, knuckles are white. He is desperately trying to turn the tide. But look at the elf. He's being grabbed. He's being bitten. He's in the middle of a literal charnel house swarm. And he's still fighting. And look, somebody's trying to choke out the ghoul. See, in modern gaming, that's just good luck on our D20. In VX, by the way, with the elf, that's biology. That's a specific, brutal, and often misunderstood rule that turns the elf into the most important person in the dungeon. Today, we're going to do a deep dive masterclass on the Ghoul. We're going to go back to the lineage of the game, from the battlefields of Chainmail to the crypts of Moldvay, to explain why this rule exists and why the Ghoul is the true king of the low-level TPK. Grab a pint, settle in. We're going deep into the parchment and the torchlight. When you're running a game, or even playing in one, it's easy to get complacent. You fought skeletons, you fought zombies. You think you know how undead work. You think they're just bags of hit points that are slow, shambling, and generally easy to hit. And then the ghouls show up. In the BX rules, Moldvay, Cook, and the modern clones like Old School Essentials, the ghoul is a 2-hit die monster. On paper, that sounds like a speed bump. First level party should be able to handle that easily, right? Well, wrong. The terror of the ghoul isn't its health, it's its efficiency. A ghoul gets 3 attacks per round, 2 claws, and a bite. Think about the action economy there. All right, if you're facing a pack of 4 ghouls, that's a standard encounter for a second or third level party. That pack is throwing 12 attack rolls at you every single round. And even if your fighter is decked out in plate mail and a shield, the law of large numbers is going to find a gap in that armor. And then the OSR, a hit from a ghoul isn't just D3 damage. It's a save versus paralysis. We'll look at the math. If you're a first level fighter, you need a 14 or better to pass that save. That means every single time one of those 12 claws touches your skin, you have a 65% chance of being removed from the active game session. You aren't just hindered, you aren't just slowed. You are out of the fight for 2 to 8 turns. Now, I want you to process that. A turn is 10 minutes of dungeon time. If you fail that save, you are paralyzed for 20 to 80 minutes. The combat will generally be over in 60 seconds or less. If your friends don't win, the ghouls don't even have to kill you. They just have to start eating while you're still warm, still conscious, and totally unable to blink. Now, let's get into the why. Because it took a little research even on my part. Why are elves immune? And to understand that, we have to look at the Old Testament of our hobby, Chainmail. In the 1971 fantasy supplement for Chainmail, ghouls didn't even rate their own entry. They were lumped in with whites. The rule stated that if a white or ghoul touched a normal figure during melee, that figure became paralyzed for 1 complete turn. Now, a normal figure in wargaming terms, or at least in those chainmail terms, meant your standard infantry, men. But when the jump was made to original D&D, Dungeons & Dragons, in 1974, the text in Volume 2, Monsters and Treasure, added a specific exclusion. Ghouls paralyze any normal figure they touch, excluding elves. And this wasn't just a random buff for the elf, it was a reflection of the nature of the paralysis. In those early wargaming days, the paralysis was often interpreted not as a chemical poison or process, but as a paralysis of fear. It was the supernatural chill of the grave, the mortal dread that hits a human being when they realize they are facing a creature that has crossed back from the other side. Because elves are immortal or extremely long lived, they possess a phase soul, ancient beyond human reckoning. They don't harbor that same biological dread of the end. This spirit doesn't recognize death the way ours does. Later, Gygax would suggest that elves are suffused with positive energy that acts like a spiritual circuit breaker against the ghoul's negative energy. Now, whether you call it fey blood or spiritual armor, mechanical results are the same. The elf is the only person in the room who can look at a ghoul in its rotting eyes and not blink. Or, I guess, if not paralyzed, can still blink. Oh, think about that. So this brings us back to our community art. You see the elf in the center of that fray? He isn't just lucky. He's a hard counter. He is the wall. See, Gary Gygax and Tom Mulvey didn't want balanced combat where every class did the same thing. Why not? 4E. They wanted procedural combat. If you were a party entering a crypt and you know there are ghouls, your marching orders should shift immediately. You don't put the fighter in front. You don't put the dwarf out there. You put the elf in the 10-foot wide bottleneck. The elf becomes the plug. He is the only one who can stand there and can take those 12 attacks. They better be wearing plate mail and shield in any case, and know for a fact he won't turn into a statue. He is the Elven Shield. If your party's elf is hanging out in the back with a bow while the fighter is getting paralyzed, well, your party is failing at the basic procedures of OSR dungeoneering. You are ignoring the tactical reality of the world. Now, let's talk about the person in the background of our community art, the cleric. A lot of the players treat the cleric like a get out of jail free card. They stand in the open, let the ghouls close the distance, and wait for the cleric to raise their holy symbol. But hey, let's check that table. At first level, the cleric needs a 9 to turn a ghoul. That's about a 40% chance of success, or a 60% chance of failure, depending on how you're doing your math. The turning trap is when the party relies entirely on that roll. If that roll fails, and it will fail 60% of the time, the ghouls are now within melee range. Once the ghouls are in melee, the cleric is just another person who needs to make a save versus paralysis. So the lesson here is turning is plan B. The elf is your plan A. Burning Wile and weapons with a very long reach to keep them at bay is your plan C. If you're playing BX, you never, ever rely on a single roll to save your life. If you're sitting behind a screen, how do you run these things? First, stop burning them like mindless zombies. Ghouls have an intelligence score of low, 3 to 7. That's smarter than a wolf. They are cunning predators. A pack of ghouls know who the soft targets are. If I'm a ghoul, I'm not saying I am, but if I was, and I see an elf who isn't stiffening up when I scratch him, I'm not going to keep attacking him. I'm going to move around. I'm going to target the magic user in the bathrobe. Or I'm going to target the thief or the halfling. See, ghouls hunt in packs. They use their numbers to surround the party. They want to maximize the number of saves the players have to make. As a ref, use that. Don't just hit the tank. Use the ghouls to create a desperate, claustrophobic scramble where the players are constantly trying to protect their paralyzed friends. And remember the lauder. Ghouls don't always kill. They paralyze. If a party loses a fight, they don't just say, all right, you're all dead. Roll new characters. As a DM, we should be going, all right, we had 2d4 turn duration on each of those paralyzations. The goals may drag the paralyzed characters back to a meat locker. So now you have a high stakes escape scenario. Maybe the elf, possibly the only one not paralyzed, has to sneak into the ghoul's den to rescue his temporarily statuized friends before the paralysis wears off and the eating starts. This is how you turn a TPK into a session that people will talk about for decades. We talk a lot about the atmosphere of the tavern. If we don't need extra rules to make the game feel more dangerous, we just need the procedures. See, the BX Ghoul is a perfect example of how the standard rules create all the horror you need. The horror isn't in the description of blood and guts. The horror is in the silence. It's in the moment the ref says the fighter stops moving. He's standing perfectly still, eyes wide, watching you. The ghouls ignore him and move toward the magic user. What do you do? See, that is the parchment and torchlight aesthetic. It's clean, it's procedural, and it's absolutely terrifying because it is so fun. It respects the lineage of the game while punishing those who forget it. Before we wrap up, I want to give a massive thank you again to Stefan Lucas. That's the community member who donated this art. I have another piece of theirs that I'm going to try to want to place to use, but in the meantime, there's a link to his work in this video's description. This is the kind of passion for the old school style that keeps the tavern going. I'm always happy to take donated art and weave it into the videos. We are now at over 220 minions in our membership program. If you find value in these deep dives, and I hope you do, if you want to support this channel that focuses on the actual procedures and history of the game we love, hit that join button. Check out the affiliate links in the description. Every bit helps us keep the ale cold and the torches lit. And seriously, next time you're prepping a dungeon, look at that marching order. Make sure your elf is where they need to be. Because if you don't, well, I hope that the party enjoys being temporary statues and likely somebody's dinner. I don't know. But be well, be safe, God bless. Let's get back to gaming.